Joining me now for more on Israel's war on Hamas and the humanitarian crisis in the Gaza Strip is Tal Heinrich, spokesperson of Israel's Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu. Tal Heinrich, there are reports from the Gaza Strip that say that the death toll is now either touching or has crossed 10,000, and a third are children in Israel's bomb attacks. Has U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken also sought a pause in the bombing so that more humanitarian assistance could be sent in?
Well, thank you for having me on today on your program, Gaurav. First, regarding the number that you just mentioned, we should keep in mind that these numbers coming from the Gaza Strip are numbers that Hamas are providing. These are terrorists, brutal, gruesome terrorists, and we should not be trusting them and the numbers that they provide, because, for instance, if you remember, for example, the Al Ahli hospital incident, which was struck by a Palestinian Islamic Jihad missile just a few weeks ago, they gave a death toll of 500 casualties 5 minutes after that missile misfell within the Gaza Strip, their own missile, and I'm repeating it because it's important. And after that, European and American outlets conducted their own investigations, and the number wasn't even close to that. In fact, was much, much lower. So again, we don't want to see any civilian casualties in Gaza. We don't want to see Palestinian civilians being caught in the crossfire. That's why we told them, we urged them for 3 weeks now to evacuate to the safer havens. But again, to your other question now, there's no daylight between Jerusalem and Washington. Everyone understands that the job has to be done. Hamas must be eliminated. We have decided as a nation that we can no longer live next to a terrorist enclave, and this is why we're acting in Gaza right now. The pressure should be on Hamas. There shouldn't be any pressure on Israel, because our cause is just and it's clear.
You want the pressure to be on Hamas, but the world wants a pause in bombing. There are several countries that are saying so. Will there be some kind of a pause or a ceasefire in bombing for additional humanitarian aid and a humanitarian corridor to be created for evacuation of those who are caught in the line of fire or in the crossfire?
There are dozens of trucks carrying many medical supplies and food and water entering the Gaza Strip every day, reaching these safer havens in the southwest, where the residents of the northern Gaza Strip have evacuated. We're talking about more than 900,000 Palestinians, as far as I know, that have evacuated from the heavy fighting areas in the north. So humanitarian aid is reaching the Palestinian civilians. But in terms of a humanitarian pause, you see, we've had humanitarian pause when Hamas released 2 hostages and then 2 other hostages, because we wanted to facilitate their safe exit from the Gaza Strip. And we said that we will be willing to consider more humanitarian pauses of this kind once Hamas releases more hostages. So we want to see international pressure mounting on Hamas to release more hostages. We're exerting military pressure and diplomatic pressure against Hamas, because this is what we want to see, our sons and daughters safe back in Israel.
But Tal Heinrich, what is Israel's roadmap for peace? Peace that can be described as just, durable and sustainable. How does one strive for peace and a ceasefire in this region at this stage? It's been 1 month of this conflict already.
Well, it is very premature to talk in terms of peace right now, because we are in a war, and we're in a war that we didn't start. We didn't want. We were very surprised, in fact, on October 7th when this war started, when Hamas death squads butchered us and raped us and mutilated us and abducted 242 hostages into the Gaza Strip. So there are different contingency plans that we have been discussing, not only amongst ourselves, by the way, with our international partners, including with our best friends, the United States. But it is very premature to discuss them right here on air, because first, pure evil must be eradicated. Hamas can be no longer. None of these plans that we can talk about includes Hamas as a ruling entity in the Gaza Strip. Once Hamas is gone, Israelis will be way more secured. And the Palestinians, they might have new opportunities should they choose differently. But everyone has to understand that the choice of terrorism will always lead to a dead end.
But can you explain what does Hamas gone actually mean on ground? Till Hamas is completely decimated as a fighting force or as an entity at the Gaza Strip?
So that will be a decision. You're asking me when will the goal of the military operation be achieved? So that is a decision that will be taken by our government, our leadership and the generals in the military. Hamas can no longer be a threat of this magnitude and this scale as they were on October 7th. They can never be allowed to do what they did. Their governance bodies in the Gaza Strip should be eliminated. They can no longer control the population in Gaza once we're done with them. And they will no longer have the motivation, in fact, to hurt us as they did on October 7th once this operation is completed. If you're asking me what does it practically mean, if we need to kill all of Hamas terrorists or should they surrender and be expelled to different countries, we will see. And that is a military and you know, our politicians will have to discuss and decide that. But we're not there yet. We're still working on eliminating them. And in fact, we've done a lot in the past 3 weeks. As far as I've heard, more than 3,000 Hamas terrorists have been killed already. And we are targeting their infrastructure that is unfortunately embedded in civilian structures as well, and underneath them, and they're hiding under population, cynically using them as human shields. So it's not an easy mission, as you can imagine. It's not an easy mission. This is why we have ground forces in Gaza right now.
You know what, when you say that you will target Hamas leadership and Hamas infrastructure, does that mean that Israel will target hospitals? I believe there's a report that another hospital was in the line of Israeli fire even today. Schools, mosques, churches and homes, if there is credible intelligence of Hamas command and control centers or weapon storage or tunnels underneath mosques or hospitals and schools.
It doesn't mean that, but I can tell you, I can't talk about a specific target and tell you if we may or may not hit it and when exactly, because I can't sit here and speculate. But we said that somebody's talking to me in my ear, so I'll take out the earplug for a second. But I will say that any place where Hamas terrorists are hiding is a legitimate military target. And we called on civilian population in the Gaza Strip to evacuate from these areas where these tunnels are at, and where the heavy fighting is now taking place, because we don't want to see anyone being caught in the crossfire between us and Hamas.
Okay. But while Israel is bombing Gaza Strip and while you say that about 3,000 Hamas fighters have been neutralized so far, what about Hamas leadership? What about leaders like Mashal Khaled or Ismail Haniyeh who may be living elsewhere, including in Qatar?
Well, we said that Hamas leadership is illegitimate. It doesn't matter if they sit in the Gaza Strip or abroad. We call on the nations of the civilized world to apply sanctions on any country that hosts them, that invites them, and so on. And, Qatar, for example, right now, they're hosting the Hamas leadership, and they say that it might benefit the West, the fact that they're there, because they might be able to open diplomatic avenues, so to say, to bring to the release of the hostages. So I say this, the proof of the burden of the proof is on them. They have to prove that this method is somehow working to benefit us too.
Okay. So Israel insists its operations in the Gaza Strip will continue till the time the hostages are returned. For joining me here on India Today, Tal Heinrich, many thanks.